the outline of my presentation will involve, I'll be first starting my presentations with giving you an overview of the research approach and the research design. How can we define these two and what is the difference between these two? Then I'll be discussing about the criteria, how to select a particular type of research design. What are the various types of research design? I'll be just giving you an overview. We will not be discussing in detail because I'll be focusing only on the non-experimental research design. Rest of the designs will be taken up by the other experts. Just also, I'll be touching upon the differences between the quantitative and qualitative research designs. Then the main focus of discussion will be on non-experimental research designs, regarding which we'll be discussing the various types of non-experimental research designs, which will primarily include the descriptive and the analytical research designs. In the topic, I had been given analytical separate, but the descriptive and analytical research designs and the survey designs, they are the part of the non-experimental research designs. And we'll be ending my presentations with the advantages and disadvantages of the non-experimental research designs. So to start with, let us see what is the difference between the research approach and the research design. I think on the very first day, some of the participants were asking regarding this, that what is the difference between research approach and research designs, and a little bit of discussion did happen on that day. So the research approach, again, I am reiterating the thing that this is the broad thing about a research question. So it basically deals with the way how to get answers to the posed problems. Like our problems can be related to certain, we want to explore certain things, we want to discuss the relationship with certain variables. So for that matter, the different types of approaches as per the research questions can be the qualitative approach, it can be the quantitative approach, or the mixed method approach. So a broad thing which we are giving to a research question is the research approach. However, the research design is very, very specific, and it is basically the blueprint of a study. It talks about the detailed outline of an investigation, that how we are going to answer a particular research questions, when the research questions is going to be answered, where the research questions will be going to be answered. So the various approaches, the specific research designs as per the research approach, which include the qualitative, quantitative, and the mixed method, include the experimental research design. It can be the quasi-experimental research design, or it can be the non-experimental research designs, depending upon the type of questions we had. And in research approach, basically it differs in terms of the objectives of a particular type of research, a particular type of a research approach, the type of research questions, the method of data collection, the production of data, how we are going to collect the data. And there could also be certain flexibility of the research designs once we talk specifically of the qualitative types of research designs. However, the research designs, they are very, very crisp. The key aspect of the research design basically include the research methodology, which type of participants we are going to have, what will be the sample, how we are going to assign the subjects to a particular group, and what will be the instrument, what will be the data collection procedures, and what will be the statistical analysis. So all the things need to be very, very clear and very, very crisp before we start planning our research study. And the common example we always compare it with the builder who is going to start building a project. So first, before start doing the construction, that person will always be preparing a map. So in map, how many story building will be there, and how many rooms will be there at each particular story, how many, what will be the design of the rooms, what will be the design of kitchens, where the plugs, etc. will be there. So we always compare the research process or the research design with the builder. and from where to get the construction material. So for that, we can always compare that which type of instruments we are going to have, whether we are going to have the already standardized type of research instruments, or the researcher is going to prepare their own instrument. So all the things, starting from the research questions, how we are going to have the statistical analysis, each and everything becomes very, very crisp and clear once we talk of the researcher design. And in research approach, probably the broadly things once we talk about, in qualitative, we want to explore the things because these are the unknown things probably lying in the society. And the type of data in quantitative research study, we are going to get the hard data. And in mixed method design, there is always the integration of the qualitative and the quantitative one. So broadly speaking, research approach is the broad reply to a research questions, and research design is the clear, crisp, and the detailed, the blueprint of a research question. That is the research design. Now, what is the criteria to select a research design? Now, if there is an intervention, of course, we'll be going towards the experimental type of research design. If there is no, it is non-experimental. So non-experimental will be out at this very particular point of time. Now, if there is an intervention, then we have to see whether is there any possibility of having a control group. If yes, we'll be going further. If no, that means we are going to have a quasi-experimental research design. Sometimes for a control group or not possible, we don't have a good number of participants available, then we always decide that let's not have the control group. Let's go only for a one group pretest post-test design. So if there is a control group, then further we have to see whether we are able to randomize the thing. If there is a randomization possibility is there, then we'll be going for the RCT or the randomized control design. If there is no possibility of randomization of the sample, then we'll be going for the quasi-experimental research study. So this is how we have to decide which type of design we have to go about, depending upon number of criteria, the type of research question we have, the number of samples, the subjects, the circumstances, the type of research study you have taken. So accordingly, we decide whether it is to be done non-experimentally or if it is to be done quasi-experimentally or experimentally. This is how we have to decide. This slide is basically giving you an overview of all the type of research designs. First, if we see that the three types of research approaches are the quantitative, qualitative, and the mixed method research. In quantitative, primarily we have two types of research design. One is the non-experimental research design, and second one is the experimental research design. In experimental research design, further categorization is under true experimental research design, quasi-experimental research design, and the pre-experimental research design. If we talk of the true experiment, then there are further designs which include the pre-test, post-test control group, post-test control group, Solomon 4 group, randomized block design, factorial design, crossover design, and the matching sample design. And if it is a quasi-experimental, it can be non-randomized control group and the time series design. If it is a pre-experimental, it is a one-shot case study design or one group pre-test, post-test design. So all the experimental designs are going to be discussed by another speaker. So, and if we talk of the qualitative, we know there are basically six approaches for the six designs for the qualitative approach, which includes the phenomenological research study, the grounded theory, ethnographic, historical, action, and the case study. It's not possible to go in detail each and every designs because we have to focus only on the non-experimental. But I just wondered, because this is the first session on the designs. So that is why I thought that I must be giving you an overview of various types of research designs. So qualitative probably again might be taken by some certain other speaker. Then third one is the mixed method approach, in which there is the integration of the quantitative and the qualitative research approaches. The various types of mixed method research design include convergent parallel design, explanatory sequential design, exploratory sequential design, embedded design, transformative design, and the multi-phase design. Basically, in mixed method, what we study is the why there is a mixing of the quantitative and the qualitative, or integration of the quantitative and qualitative. It is at the time of data collection and then at the time of data analysis. In certain types of mixed method design, the qualitative and quantitative data is collected simultaneously, and then analysis is being done. In certain type of designs, first qualitative is data is collected, then quantitative, and then the analysis. In certain, first we collect the qualitative, then quantitative. Likewise, so it depends upon the time of data collection and the method of data analysis in all the mixed type of research design. There are certain designs in which are not coming under any of the heading of mixed method, quantitative or qualitative. They are considered under other type of research designs, which include the formative type of research design, operational, methodological, meta-analysis, evaluation studies, and the outcome research. In nursing, if we see, we conduct many methodological research designs, and nowadays all meta-analysis, meta-synthesis, many systematic reviews are also being undertaken by a number of nursing experts. But majority of the time, otherwise formative, operational, and the evaluation studies and the outcome studies, they are also being conducted by the nursing experts, but comparatively less. So this here I have just given you an overview of various types of research approaches, and then this particular type of research design under each approach. Let's go further. Let's move further. So this slide is giving us the difference between the qualitative and the qualitative research design. Again, just giving you an overview of the qualitative methods and the quantitative methods. The objective of conducting the qualitative research is we want to explore and understand a phenomena regarding which less information is available. We want to go or gain in-depth understanding of a specific issue. We want to describe the individual experiences, and listening it particularly the main key if we talk of the qualitative methods. However, in quantitative methods, these are carried out to inquire about precise measurement and the variations. These studies are carried out to know the causal relationship between various types of variables and to illustrate the characteristics of a population. The format of questions asked in the qualitative research method is we always start with the how, why, what, and questions are always the open-ended because we want to explore certain phenomena. So these are not the closed-ended questions. However, in quantitative methods, we always go for the quantitative data in the form of how many, how much, do you, will this, and the questions are always the closed-ended questions. The format of data obtained is in qualitative method is non-numerical, mainly textual type of data we are getting in the form of words, pictures, and the data can be collected in the form of audio or video. It can be observed but cannot be measured. We can always assess the views and the opinion of the people in the qualitative research design. However, in quantitative, it is always the numerical, yes, no type of data we are getting, and data can be counted or measured. And the perspective in qualitative research design is always AMEC, which is called the users. So we always look at the whole context from the participants' perspective. We want to know more and more information from the participants. That is why we always go for the open-ended questions in the qualitative methods. However, in the quantitative, this is more of the ethic, which is the provider from the researcher point of view. So we always look at the specific aspects from the researcher aspect. So the researcher is asking questions and the participants are giving us the reply to that. So less talk will be by the participants. However, in qualitative, more talk will be there by the participants, and the listening is the key in case of qualitative research design. And the method of data collection in qualitative method is the observation, in-depth interviews, and key informant interviews can be conducted, and FGTs or IDIs, etc., are to be carried out in qualitative methods. However, in quantitative, we always go for surveys, we always go for the structured interviews majority of the time. We can always get the data from registers, or we can prepare various types of questionnaires. The standardized, non-standardized questionnaires can be made use in case of quantitative data. And the tools are always open-ended question route. We can have the questionnaire guide with the flexible sequencing. because it depends upon which type of answers we are getting. Then more leading questions can be asked once we want to collect the qualitative data. However, in quantitative, the questions are always closed-ended with predetermined sequence and structures. Majority of the time, we go accordingly with which type of questionnaire we have prepared, and accordingly we collect the data from the participants. The study designs in case of qualitative is relatively flexible. Questions evolve as the interview progress. So in between also we always can ask the leading questions can be asked from the participants. And participant responses may affect the sequence of the responses. Study design is iterative, that is data collection and research questions are adjusted according to what is learned. Then the researcher starts again to explore new insights gained in the previous visits. And question may vary from one respondent to the other respondent. And here in quantitative, the questions are always fixed. Same set of questions are asked from each participants. And participants' response do not affect the sequence of the responses because we have the structured questionnaire available with us. Study design is based on the statistical assumptions. It is always go in the linear distinct once we are collecting the data. And same tool is to be used by for all the participants. And in qualitative, this was also another question which someone asked on the very first day, what should be the sample size in qualitative. So in qualitative, redundancy of information or redundancy principle is used to collect the data. This is the point wherein we start getting any new information from the participants. So as such, we don't calculate the sample size in qualitative research methods. Whatever informations we are getting, suppose after interviewing around 20 participants in a research study, we stop getting any new information. So once there is a saturation of data, we should always go for 2 to 3 more participants above that, so that to make sure that we are not getting any new information from the participants. However, various types of formulas are used in quantitative research studies. For example, if it is just a prevalence studies, we have different types of formulas. If it is some interventional studies, we will have a different types of formulas to be used. We are going to have another session on calculation of sample size for the quantitative research studies. And analysis in case of qualitative, it uses the inductive reasoning. Analysis is always descriptive and expressive. It involves a methodical and iterative process of searching, categorizing, and integrating the data. And we always get the data in the form of thematic or textual after doing coding and indexing. So the method of getting out the information in the qualitative research method is entirely different as compared to the quantitative one, wherein we use various types of tests, various types of descriptive and inferential statistics, depending upon the type of data we have, are used to get the information, to get the results in case of quantitative research designs. And we always make use of the test of significance in quantitative research methods. So this is in brief about the differences between the qualitative and the quantitative research methods. Now going on the main aspect of today's presentation, that is the non-experimental research design. So what is the non-experimental research design? Basically, it is a broad category of research design and is one of the most commonest research design which is being used in the nursing studies. And specifically, if we talk of the novice researcher, or if you talk of the research studies which we give to the undergraduate nursing students. Of course, we expect much more from the PG students, wherein we usually don't allow the students to go for the non-experimental research designs. But we can always go for the non-experimental research designs once we give the group projects to our undergraduate nursing students. So it's a broad category of the research design. The researcher basically observes the phenomena as they're occurring naturally. So the non-experimental research designs, they are lacking all the 3 essential characteristics of a true experiment. I hope you all must be clear by now. What are the 3 essential characteristics of a true experimental research design? Is the manipulation of the independent variable, having a control group, and the randomization. So all the three aspects, they are missing in the non-experimental research design. So once it is not possible for us to manipulate the independent variable, it's not possible to have a control group in a research study, and it is not possible to go for randomization, we have always to select the non-experimental research design. So these design, the non-experimental researcher design, they describe something that has occurred as such. So, but we can always examine the relationship between many variables depending upon, again, we have number of non-experimental researcher designs. In certain designs, we have just to see how the things are happening. In certain design, we can always go for the correlation between the various variables. And these are directed towards determining the nature of a situation as it exists at the time of the study. So with the exception of causal comparative research, non-experimental research is not generally directed toward hypothesis testing. The aim is to describe what exists with respect to the variables or the conditions in a situation. So talking about the type of experimental research designs, I saw a number of books, and there was many discrepancy which were showing some of the books are showing something else, some of the books are showing something else. So I have tried myself to make the things more clear and have categorized the non-experimental research design primarily under two headings, which can be as per the objective of our research study, and it can be as per the time dimensions. If we talk of as per the objective of research studies, the non-experimental research designs can be primarily categorized under three main headings, which include the descriptive research design. These can be the exploratory research designs, and these can be the survey designs. And the descriptive research design can further be categorized under three main headings, which include the univariate research designs, correlational research designs, and the comparative research designs. On the other hand, if we talk of the time, as per the time dimensions, we can categorize the non-experimental research design as the cross-sectional research designs, in which we are collecting the data at one given point of time. It can be the longitudinal research studies, in which we want to observe a cohort of participants over a period of time. And it can be the retrospective research design, which is also called the case control studies, or it can be the prospective research design, which is also called the cohort design. These retrospective and prospective, they are also considered under the analytical research designs. Now, another thing I wanted to make clear here is that these research designs, they are not mutually exclusive. There could be, overlapping of certain designs. For example, if we talk of the longitudinal, and if we talk of the prospective or retrospective, the prospective and retrospective studies, they are also called the longitudinal. In retrospective, we are going backwards. In prospective, we are going forward. And moreover, in one research study, we can always have more than one research designs. And we can always write the designs as per the type of objectives we had. For example, if you want to carry out one RCT, and your first objective might be to know about the current situation regarding a particular thing. So your objective will always be a descriptive sort of objective, or descriptive sort of data in the first objective. In the subsequent objectives, we can always, it can be methodological, it can be your RCT, it can be depending upon the type of research questions we have. So more than one research designs could be there in one research study. Now, we'll be discussing all these designs in the subsequent slides. But just to differentiate, what is the difference between descriptive and analytical? Because both the things seems to be similar, but there is a little bit of difference between the descriptive and the analytical research design. Descriptive or the non-analytical studies, they merely try to describe the data about one or more characteristics of a group of individuals. These do not answer the questions or establish relationship between the variables. However, so there is no relationship between the variables we see in the descriptive research designs. However, in analytical studies, These attempt to test a hypothesis and try to establish the relationship between the variables. So we want to test the hypothesis in analytical study designs, and we want to establish the relationship between the variables in case of analytical research designs. And these analytical studies can be observations if the exposure is to be determined, and they can be interventional if the researcher actively want to administer certain type of interventions. So the descriptive studies, what we are doing in descriptive study, we are generating the hypothesis. We are answering what, who, where, and when. However, in analytical studies, we are testing the hypothesis and answering why and how. So this slide, I hope it will be better clear to you the difference between descriptive and the analytical studies. Further, just to make the things more clear, what is happening in the descriptive studies, the descriptive studies, they describe the phenomena as it is existing. It is used to identify and obtain information on the characteristics of a particular issue. However, the analytical studies, they aim to understand the phenomena by discovering or measuring the causal relationship between the variables. In descriptive studies, these are carried out, these are the fact-finding inquiries, and they are primarily carried out by various types of survey methods. However, the analytical studies, we are collecting the data and it is analyzed properly and it is explained further. The descriptive studies are carried out to ascertain and describe the characteristics of the issues. They are done to describe the state of affair as it is existing as present, and there is no control over the variables. However, in analytically, it is going beyond merely describing the characteristics. Definitely, we are going for the descriptive analysis also, but we are going further in the analytical studies. It explains existing state of affairs from the availability, and it works within the constraints of the variables. Because in analytical studies, for example, whether it is retrospective or it is prospective, we are always controlling the variables. We have to match both the cases and controls in case of analytical studies. However, these things are not there in the descriptive studies. For example, in the descriptive type of studies may include what is the absentee rate amongst a particular group of workers. So this is just the prevalence of the absentees in a particular group of workers, or what are the feelings of the workers faced with the redundancy. So we are studying what in the descriptive studies. However, we are studying how in the analytical studies, that how can the number of complaints made by the customers be reduced? How can the absentee rate among the employees can be reduced? Why is the introduction of empowerment seen as a threat by the departmental managers? So we are studying how and why in the analytical studies, and we are just studying what in the descriptive studies. So the features of a descriptive design include that we are observing, documenting, describing the phenomena in its natural setting without any manipulation or having a control. We are trying to help to get the help to gain more information within a particular field in the real world. There is no manipulation of the variables. They are studied as they really exist in the real world. So these type of descriptive research designs, they can be used to develop the theories, to identify the problems with current practices, and to make the judgment. And there could always be bias in case of descriptive studies, which can be prevented by operationally defining the variables properly, having a large sample size, having a random selection of the participants from a large group of participants, and having the valid and reliable tools and formal method of data collection. So if we are very, very careful, even then the descriptive type of studies carried out could give us a large number of data, could give us the reply to our research questions very well. But we need to be very, very careful at the time of designing the descriptive research studies. As discussed, descriptive research studies can be univariate. It can be the correlational studies, as already been highlighted, the type of the descriptive research designs. Now, talking about the univariate descriptive design, it includes description of frequency of occurrence of a phenomena So it is mainly or primarily used to identify or describe the perception regarding certain things, the awareness of the people regarding certain things. We want to assess the behavior of the people. We want to assess the attitude of the people. We want to take the knowledge regarding a particular thing or the practices, etc. So the phenomena as it is existing, we want to assess in the univariate descriptive design. So univariate, from the name itself, it is saying that there is only one variable, but it doesn't necessarily focus on the study of a single variable. There could be more than one variable which can be studied in the univariate descriptive research design. So the basic purpose of the study is not only to describe the variable, but also to establish a relationship between the variables. For example, a researcher is interested in assessing the experiences of the patients with the rheumatoid arthritis. So the researcher may describe the frequency of symptoms experienced by the patient and the type of treatment they are received. So there could be number of or multiple variables which can be studied even in the univariate descriptive type of designs. But the two common, usually the two common variant of the univariant studies in the field of epidemiology are the prevalence and the incidence studies. These are two types of studies usually we study in the epidemiology, in the field of epidemiology. Now, what are the prevalence study? What is the incidence? Prevalence, we all know that these are the number of cases at a given point of time. And the formula to calculate the prevalence is number of cases at a given point of time divided by total number of persons at risk multiplied by 100. Similarly, we calculate the incidence wherein the number of new cases within a specified time period are to be known. And the formula to calculate the incidence is the number of new cases over a specified period of time divided by total number of persons at risk multiplied by 100. So these type of studies are to be carried out, are to be categorized under the univariate descriptive designs if we talk of from the field of epidemiology. Here you can see these are the studies which we carried out at our institutions. So the first study was calculation of the point prevalence of bed sore among the admitted patients in a tertiary care hospital. This study was carried out in our institution. So what we did, we went to the hospital, went to all the wards wherein the adult patients are admitted, and on that day, it is a 3-4 years old study. So on that day, there were around 751 patients who were identified to be at risk of developing bed sore as per the CAD scale. And then we calculated the point prevalence, that how many patients had the bed sore, and it was seen that around 33.3% patients, they were with bed sores. Maximum were from neurosurgical ward and the orthopedic unit. And it was followed by the other persons from the medical ward or the other surgical ward. But maximum prevalence was there in the neurosurgical ward. Similarly, the second study we carried out, this study was about the point prevalence. So point prevalence is on a single day. This whole data was collected on a single day. We started in the morning till evening, that how many patients were at risk. In the second study, in which we tried to look for the incidence of bed sore, herein what we did is we started enrolling the new patients when they were admitted in the hospital, and then we try to follow up the patients of a period of time. So in the incidence study, we studied around 2408 patients, and then we assessed how many patients developed bed sore over a period of time. So here again, what we saw that the incidence of bed sore was maximum in the intensive care unit, which was around 9%. It was followed by orthopedic, emergency ward, and the neurosurgical ward. So this is just to make the things more clear that how we can carry out the prevalence studies and the incidence studies. Now, the second one is the comparative design, which is considered under the descriptive study. It involves comparing and contrasting two or more mutually exclusive group in relation to variable of interest, often a single point of time. So it is used to compare the two distinct group on the basis of selected attribute. It can be knowledge, perception, attitude, physical and psychological symptoms. For example, a comparative study on the health problems among rural and urban older people in any of the districts can be carried out. Similarly, a comparative study can be carried out to assess the prevalence of attention deficit hyperactive disorder among the children working and non-working. So working and non-working will be the comparison. In the previous one, rural and urban was the comparison. Then recently we carried out a study in our institution, which was a comparative study of conducting various types of nursing activities among the nurses working in the general ward and the ICU. So general ward and the ICU is the comparison. And another thing we need to understand is that these comparative designs, they can be the descriptive designs or they can be the exploratory design depending upon the phenomena under study. Third one is the correlation research design. This is also called the ex post facto research design, which has been taken from the Latin word, which means from after the fact. So the researcher examines the relationship between two or more variables in a natural setting without manipulation or the control. And they try to study the relationship of two or more variables without any interventions. We are not having any intervention, but we want to see the correlation between the two variables. For example, a correlation study on the effect of smoking on lung cancer can be carried out in any of the districts. Another study we can always carry out to know the relationship of correlation of the height of the children with the dietary habits. And again, it is important to understand that these correlation study, they can be descriptive or exploratory depending upon the phenomena under study. So that is why I told that these, all the research, all the non-experimental research designs, they cannot be mutually exclusive. There could be overlapping of the research designs of more than one research designs. So the features of the correlation research design include that here actually what the researcher tries to examine the strength and direction of relationship between the variables by determining how change in one variable can be correlated with the change in another variable. And correlation coefficient, we all know that the value of correlation coefficient, it ranges from -1 to +1. And the various types of relationship can be, we can have perfect positive correlation, there could be zero correlation, or there could be perfect negative correlation. Perfect positive correlation will be there once one variable is increasing, the other variable is also increasing. If both the variables are not incoherent with each other, there will be zero correlation. But if one is increasing, another one is decreasing, then there will be perfect negative correlation. So here we see the strength and direction of correlation in the correlation studies. So the researcher examines the strength and direction of the relationship between the variables by determining how the change in one variable is correlated with the change in another variable. And these studies have independent and dependent variable, and the effect of independent variable is observed on the dependent variable without any manipulation of the independent variable. So there is no intervention, we are just having the observation only. And correlation also doesn't prove here as the causation, because the mere existence of the relationship between the variables, it is in fact not enough to warrant the conclusion that one variable caused the other, even if the relationship is strong, because there could be a number of other extraneous variable which can be affecting the dependent variable. So we have to control, or we have to identify those variables in order to conclude that this particular thing is affecting the dependent variable. And in some correlation studies, the identification of the dependent and independent variable may be difficult. However, in most of the studies, independent variable is identified, which without any intervention influence the dependent variable. For example, you can see here that a correlation investigation of the study habit and visual acuity among school children studying in the selected schools of Hamirpur. So here the study habits are the independent variable and the visual acuity is the dependent variable. And in epidemiology, if we see these type of correlation studies, they are called the cause and effect studies, where the cause and effect relationship is investigated in natural setting without imposing any of the experimental intervention. And this cause and effect relationship can be investigated either in the forward manner, which is called the prospective or cause to effect, or it can be in the backward manner, which is called the retrospective, which is the effect to the cause. So these type of research studies, In epidemiology point of view, if you talk, they can be the prospective studies or they can be the retrospective studies. So just to highlight the advantages of correlation studies, it basically include we know that they are very easy, they are fast, they are inexpensive way to inquire and processing a lot of data we can generate, which can be studied or it can be used to investigate the relationship between various variables. It can be useful in exploratory research to determine the relationship that later on can be tested, that later on can be used to investigate further, or that later can be used in the experimental research designs. And more straightforward and easier method to implement, and data can be collected very, very quickly. Third design is the exploratory design, which also comes under the descriptive research designs. And sometimes we know that very little is known about a particular phenomena under study. So for those type of investigations, we need to go for the exploratory research designs, which are used to identify, explore, and describe the existing phenomena and their related factors. So they are not simply description of the frequency of occurrence of phenomena, but it is in-depth exploration and study of related factors to further improve the understanding about the already less understood phenomena. For example, an exploratory study can be carried out to assess the multifactorial dimensions of falls and home safety measures for elderly people living in selected communities of a city. So many exploratory studies can be carried out. Basically, these are the studies to be carried out regarding which less is known. We have less data regarding that particular phenomena. Next is the retrospective research design. From the retrospective, from the word itself, it should be clear. Retro means looking at the past. And the researcher studies the current phenomena by seeking the information from the past. The researcher identifies the effect first and then looks back to identify the cause, and also tries to link the present phenomena with the past event, and he or she has to have a backward approach to study the phenomena, where he or she moves from effect to identify the cause. So in retrospective, we are going backward. This is the design, just to make the things more clear, that we are starting. You can see here, this is the start of study, which is present. So we have the exposed group, we have the unexposed group, and the exposed group can be having disease, or there could be no disease. Similarly, the unexposed person can be having disease, or that person may not be having disease. So here we can see we are going backward, we are going in the past, and we are trying to identify the causes for the present thing which has happened now. So these are also called the case control studies. So they start from a disease or the outcome in the present and going back in time to link it with the presumed if cause or the exposure in the past. And data is collected through record reviews or asking the subjects about the information related to the exposure, behavior, or any other instances which have occurred in the past that will explain the research questions or the hypothesis. And the unique features of the case control study that individuals with the outcome of interest, which are called the cases, they are compared to the individuals who do not have the outcome but were at risk for it, which are called the controls. So this is the case control study. So basically, it involves comparing the cases with two groups, a certain group. For example, it can be the people who are suffering from breast cancer at present, and it can be the control, for example, the women without breast cancers, who are selected to be similar to the case with regard to key background. So in case control study, it is important to understand that we always match the two groups with certain variables. For example, it can be the age, it can be the family history of breast cancers. So we can always look for these particular things. So our controls, we need to match with the cases, and then we'll be asking the informations from the cases as well as from the control, and will be generating the inferences. So both the groups should be similar. In this design, only one measure of association between exposure and outcome is appropriate, which is called ratio. So in case control study, we need to understand this phenomena, which is known as the odds ratio. What is the odds ratio? Basically, it tells us how much higher the odds of exposure are among the cases than among the controls. Usually an odd ratio of 1 or close to 1 indicates that the odds of exposure among cases are the same or similar to the odds of exposure among the controls. But there are certain potential biases in the case control study. The three common biases which are leading to exposure assessment errors, these include the recall bias, these are the observer bias or the selection bias. What is the recall bias? Basically, the exposure and outcome, they have already occurred in the case control study. So there is a possibility of differential report of exposure information between the cases and controls based on their disease status, because we are asking the background information. The person may or may not remember. So that could be one of the bias. It can be the observer's bias. The investigator's knowledge of an individual disease status may also influence the gathering of the information that the person has already developed. Definitely the person might be having these type of risk factors. So this can be the observer bias, and it could also be the selection bias, which include the possibility as inherent in case control study, where it gives rise to non-comparability between the cases and the control. We need to be very, very careful while selecting the controls if we want to compare both the cases and controls. So this is one of the study we carried out at our institutions, in which we tried to look for the risk factors of cervical cancer by undergoing this type of research design, a case control study. So we had the 70 age-matched cases and 70 controls. They were enrolled in the study, and we tried to look for the risk factors, and we saw that there was a significant association at P less than 0.05 of cervical cancer with education, place of residence, using an old clothes, sanitary napkins, young age at marriage, and number of husbands, partners, etc. So it was concluded that assessment of the risk factors of cervical cancer is very, very important, because with prior knowledge of the risk factors, cervical cancer can be identified. Identification of the high-risk population and starting early screening was found to be effective in early recognition of the cervical cancer. So this is how we can always go for the case control study. And sometimes it is said that if we have that the control should be taken double than the cases, so that we are able to have the good correlation between both the cases and the controls. But again, it depends upon the availability of sample. Advantages of case control study, that we are avoiding exposing the study participants to unnecessary risk in order to identify a causal relationship, because the things have already been happened. We are not giving any intervention. We are just observing the phenomena by asking, by going back. And disadvantages is more prone to susceptibility and various types of biases, which I have already discussed. So this was about the case control or the retrospective study. Now we'll be talking about the prospective research design, which include prospective means going forward. So here the researcher identifies the causes first and then looks forward to identify the effect. The researcher relates the present to the future. And the prospective studies, they start with the presumed cause and then go to the presumed effect. And researcher observes phenomena from cause to effect. And these designs are again longitudinal research designs. So here you can see, this is the start of the study. We have a study population. The certain people might be exposed to that particular phenomena or unexposed, but this is the start, which is the present, and we are going in future. In exposed, there will be certain people who may develop that disease, and there will be certain people who may not develop that disease. Similarly, in unexposed also, certain people might develop certain disease, or there could be certain people who may not develop disease. So we are going in the future. We are observing a cohort of population who will be developing certain type of phenomena under study. For example, you can look here, we can always go for the lung cancer and smoking. Just a simple example. In prospective lung cancer studies, the researchers start with the sample of smoker and non-smoker and later compare the two groups in terms of the lung cancer incidence, that how many smokers develop the lung cancer and how many non-smokers develop the lung cancers. And then we can always statistically analyze the result. And prospective studies are costlier than the retrospective studies because of considerably, and definitely they are stronger than the retrospective studies, because we have to follow up a group of people over a period of time. And ability to demonstrate the temporal order of exposure and outcome, it's definitely a necessary criteria to determine the causality. And here we are looking for the relative risk. and the risk ratio, which is calculated in the prospective research studies. For example, just to make the things more clear, I have just taken this example that suppose you want to conduct a cohort study and gather the following data on the effect of gasoline fumes exposure on the respiratory illness among the outcome workers. So here we want to see the effectiveness of the gasoline fumes on the respiratory illness. So you have exposed people and you have unexposed, and out of the exposed and unexposed, there are certain people who developed disease and there are certain people who did not develop this disease, and the total were 400 people. So in this study, the risk in the exposed group is 60 out of 200. This is the 60 out of 200 or 0.3 cases per person. Or if we want to go for the 100, it is 30 cases per 100. And the risk in unexposed group is 25 out of 200. Therefore, or 0.152 cases, 13 cases per 100. Therefore, the risk ratio is 0.30 divided by 0.125, the unexposed, or the 2.4. So a risk ratio of 2.4 implies that the exposed group has 2.4 times the risk of developing the respiratory illness as compared to the unexposed group. So this is how we have to calculate the risk ratio. So risk ratio can also be called the relative risk, or RR. It quantifies the population's risk of disease from a particular exposure, and it is calculated by having this formula, which involves risk in the exposed group divided by risk in the unexposed group, which should be clear from my previous example. Another example, what is the relationship between being obese and getting type 2 diabetes? So here you can see risk in the exposed group who were obese and risk of that type 2 diabetes in the exposed group who were obese, and risk in the unexposed group who are non-obese. Suppose it is 0.0076 or 0.0013, which is 5.8 risk ratio. So basically, we should know the interpretation of 5.8, which includes the risk of diabetes among those who are obese is 5.8 times the risk among those who are not obese. So advantages of cohort study include they are most effective method to show the potential cause of a disease. They are less prone to bias because individuals are selected and observed before the occurrence of the disease. However, there are certain disadvantages that they can be very, very expensive. They can be time consuming. And moreover, there could be high attrition. High attrition matlab, jab we are observing a group of people over a period of time, there could be certain people who will leave in between. So to avoid that, we have to have more sample size at the time of enrollment of the participants. Just to compare the prospective and retrospective study, the outcome measures point of view, if we talk in the prospective, we are calculating the incidence of disease among the exposed and incidence of disease among the non-exposed. In retrospective, in case control study, we are looking for the proportion of the cases exposed and proportion of the controls exposed. Measures of risk in prospective is relative risk. In retrospective, it is the odds ratio. The temporal relationship, it is easy to establish in prospective and it is little hard to establish in the retrospective. Multiple association, if we see, it is possible to study association of an exposure with the multiple diseases, and it is possible to study the association of disease with several exposures. Time required is long in case of prospective studies because we have to follow up the subjects over a period of time, and in retrospective, it is relatively short. It is less expensive prospective and relatively more expensive the retrospective. Expensive prospective and relatively less expensive retrospective studies. The potential bias in case of prospective, it is outcome assessment bias and the follow-up bias, and exposure assessment bias or the selection bias, which we have already discussed, or the researcher bias in case of retrospective study designs. So this was about the retrospective and prospective. And another important design, which is quite common in nursing studies, is the cross-sectional study designs. Cross-section from the word meaning, it should be clear that it is a surface. It is a surface or shape exposed by making a straight cut through something, especially at right angle to an axis. It is also called snapshot observational studies. So both the exposure and the disease, they are determined simultaneously for each subject. The researcher collects the data at one particular point of time. For example, the point prevalence which I discussed, one of the study, this is basically a cross-sectional study. On one day, we collected whole of the data. So all the phenomena under study, they are captured during one data collection period. For example, a cross-sectional survey can be carried out to assess the prevalence of anemia in adolescent girls residing in rural area. So this is the design for the cross-sectional study, that you have a defined population. You collect the data on exposure and diseases, wherein you will be looking for the people who are exposed with the disease. There could be exposed without disease, unexposed with the disease, and unexposed without the disease. Just to give you an example, suppose we are interested in carrying out a study to know the relationship of smoking status. This is the exposure and hypertension, which is the disease. We will survey a defined population and will try to determine the smoking status and the presence and absence of the hypertension. So each subject can thus be categorized into 4 possible subject group, that the smokers and hypertensive, non-smoker hypertensive, smoker normotensive, and non-smoker normotensive, the 4 categories which I discussed in my previous slide. The advantages, number of advantages of cross-sectional studies are there. They are very, very quick. Immediately, we need to have a survey questionnaire with us. We can go and collect the data. So it's quite economical. We have not to follow up the people over a period of time. We have just to collect the data at one point of time. So it is easy to manage, easy to analyze, and good statistics can be carried out. Another design is the longitudinal research design. This design is used to collect data over an extended period of time, which is called the long study. And this study can demonstrate change over a period of time. Again, in this group, because we'll be following up the patients over a period of time, attrition is one of the biggest drawback of this type of design. For example, assessment of perception of the nursing students towards nursing profession from the beginning of the nursing program to its end can be carried out over the period of time. We can follow up the students over all the 4 years and can see their perception regarding this nursing profession. There are 3 types of further designs in the longitudinal designs, which include the trend studies. These can be the panel studies or they can be the follow-up studies. In longitudinal design trend studies, what we are doing is the sample from the general population are studied over time with respect to some phenomena. And different samples are selected at repeated intervals, but samples are always drawn from the same population. So different samples will be there, but overall population will remain the same. And this will permit the researcher to examine the pattern and rate of change and to make prediction about future direction based on the previously identified patterns and rates of change. So here, basically, we want to know the pattern and rate of change over the period of time. For example, you can see this example that trend studies can be conducted to analyze the number of students entering the nursing program and to forecast the future supplies of the nursing personnel. So over the period of time, we see that there are a number of changes which are happening. In nursing profession, some of the people, it could be less, it can be more, but there is a change in pattern. So whenever you want to study the pattern of certain things, we can always follow up the same group of people and can always go for the trend studies. Similarly, we have another pattern of panel studies in the longitudinal design. In panel studies, some people provide data at 2 or the same people provide data at 2 or more points in time. Again, it depends upon your objective, that how many times you want to observe the same people, whether in a day you want to observe the people or you want to observe the people of over a period of time. So panel, basically what it is a sample of subjects which is involved in the study. Panel studies yield more information than the trend studies because the research can examine the pattern of change and reason for change. And researcher can identify individuals who did and did not change and explore the characteristics that differentiate the 2 groups. For example, exploring over time the coping mechanisms of couple with infertility. Initially, it may be different, but over the period of time, they may have started coping with that particular thing. So we can always observe the phenomena. On that day, Dr. Lata was giving very good examples. For example, you want to see the breast newborn, the pattern of breastfeeding in the newborn. We can always assess the newborn in a day, maybe 4 times, or over the period of time, that how many started at what time, what were the problems. Like that, we can always explore the panel studies. So the panel studies, they are difficult, might be difficult, because depending upon the objectives, we may have to follow them over a period of time, and sometimes can be expensive to manage. And most serious challenge to panel studies is the loss of participants over the period of time. Follow-up studies, again, it's an overlapping thing. This is again a cohort studies, or a group of subjects that experience some type of event in a selected time period and studying at the different intervals. Follow-up studies are undertaken to determine the subsequent status of the subjects with the specified condition or those who received a specified intervention. For example, sample of premature infants may be followed up to assess their later perceptual and the motor development. So follow-up studies, from the name, it should be clear that we are following up a group of people over the period of time. So this follow-up studies can be included even in the experimental designs. So another, we are about to end my presentation. The last one is the survey design. Survey design is one of the most commonly used non-experimental research design to describe a population of interest by administering a survey or a questionnaire to the participants. Survey studies assess the characteristics of whole of the population of people or the situation. It involves collection of information from a sample of individuals through their responses to questions, which can be administered face-to-face, through email, through telephone calls, or through internet or other wire medias, which can be used. We can just prepare a questionnaire and can to send a group of people and can get the information from them, which was quite prevalent during especially the COVID period. And 3 types of questions or statements which can be included. We can have the open-ended questions, we can have the partially open-ended questions, or there can be the restricted items depending upon the our research questions or objectives of our study. However, there are certain survey errors in the survey methods, like there could be inadequate coverage of the population due to poor sampling frame. We need to have a good sampling frame if we want to go for, especially for all the type of descriptive research studies. The process of random sampling can result in sampling error. That is, difference could exist between the characteristics of the sample and the population that arise due to chance. And there could also be a lot of non-response from the people. We also saw that we were sending the questions to a number of people and hardly we were getting any response. So non-response rate is quite high in survey method when individuals refuse to respond or cannot be contacted because they might have some common characteristics related to the research questions. But well-conducted survey research, it should always include a specific research question, and we should always should have a good hypothesis. It should be very well methodically, carefully designed, and should be very well written. Questions should be with us with appropriate response options, and should be very well designed and implemented representative sampling method in order to have good response from the participants. So we saw that there are a number of advantages and disadvantages of the non-experimental research design. That always is there with any type of research designs. However, if we see for the non-experimental research design, these designs tend to be closest to the real life situations. These are more suitable for nursing research studies, wherein it's very, very difficult for us to go for a core experimental or core RCT. So we can always easily carry out these type of non-experimental research designs. More understanding about the phenomena could be there, especially if we have a good large sample size available with us. And specifically, if we have insufficient time, if we have a shortage of fund, and the researchers, especially the novice researchers, could be quite beneficial by having this non-experimental research designs. However, certain disadvantages include that the results obtained and relationship between the dependent and independent variable can never be absolutely clear or error-free. In certain type of designs, we can have like correlation, we can have a good relationship, but in other descriptive, it may not be possible. And these studies are conducted for comparative purposes using non-random selected groups, if they are there, which may not be homogeneous and tend to be dissimilar in different traits and characteristics, which may affect the authenticity as well as generalizability of the study results. There could be problem in the by having the causal relationship with assurance in these type of studies. The correlation studies, they might be susceptible to faulty interpretation of researchers' work with pre-existing groups that have formed through the self-selection that may really, affect, especially in the case control studies, because self-selection, we know that this the definition has been given by Karlinger et al., that these occurs when the members of the group being studied are in a group in part because they differentially possess trait or characteristics extraneous to the research problem, characteristics that possibly influence or are otherwise related to the variables of the research problem. So self-selection or selection of the, especially in the case controls is very, very important. So we studied various types of designs. We know that designs are extremely important component of a research study. We need to be very, very carefully identify a particular type of research design. Should be very, very appropriate for the purpose of study as per the objectives of our study. And the non-experimental research study, we collect the data to describe the phenomena as it is existing in nature. And the various types of research designs, they can be categorized as per the objectives of a research study, or they can be categorized as per the time dimensions. So I will stop here and would like to have questions, if any, from the participants. Thank you so much for patient listening.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for wonderful detailed presentation. It was really very interesting and informative, and it has cleared many concepts with good examples. So now we will take up the questions.
Can I close the presentation?
Yes, ma'am, you can close. Ma'am, shall I read the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel Shilpi Das has asked, is it true that we no longer use the term quasi-experimental terminology?
No, nothing like that. We have to have, because the three characteristics of a core experimental design, if it is not possible for us, and especially if we talk of the nursing studies, sometimes it may not be possible for us to go for core RCT, then we have to go for the quasi-experimental research design. Okay. It is no more absolute, it is very well existing in nursing studies.
Yes, ma'am. So another question from C. Delphine. Okay, she was asking actually to share the slide. Ma'am, next question is from Alur Mozi. She is asking, kindly key differentiate the pre-experimental and quasi-experimental design.
This will be discussed in the next class, in which the next speaker is going to talk about the experimental designs. That person will be talking. I think the things will be more clear.
Yes.
I think it's tomorrow only, because these two are part of the experimental research, the quantitative research approaches. So
yes,
ma'am will be probably discussing all these.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, Thomas Kuti is asking, like, for gap analysis in education, kindly give a valuable suggestion on a research design which can be used.
Gap analysis, basically, what exactly she wants to know the gap in what sense she wanted to study. Basically, she wanted to study the previous one or new one, then it can be the comparative design. Over the period of time, there had been changes in the syllabi. Indian Nursing Council 10 years back was different, but now it is further, because of semester system is coming and it is different. So we can always have the comparative design.
Yes. Ma'am, Ms. Varsha Das has asked, ma'am, can you give an example of positive, zero and negative correlation? I think positive, you have explained.
Yeah, I have already explained.
Then
into variables.
Again, Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Shilpi Das has asked, ma'am, what is the type of correlationship when one variable increases and the other decreases?
It is a negative correlation.
Then Thomas Kuti is asking, if I need to study on current following syllabus and its efficiency, how can I proceed?
You have to, again, this is the cohort, na? If we want to implement something new and we want to see further, we have to follow the same group of people over the period of time. And then we can ask their perception. What did they understood what was their perception regarding the new syllabi.
Yes, ma'am. Vidya Lakshmi is asking, what should be the minimum difference in time period between 2 points of data collection in trend studies?
It depends upon your research question. For example, I talked about the breastfeeding, then you may have to do maybe after every 2 hours in a day. It depends upon the type of research questions you have.
Okay, ma'am. Manjot Kaur is asking, like in longitudinal follow-up studies, how data will be collected from sample? Like through phone or personally, we have to go to home because the patient is discharged.
It depends. It depends. Again, your research question, it depends upon the availability of resources with you. Sometimes we may have to go for certain telephonic conversation with the people, but later on, at least after having 2 to 3 telephonic conversation, there should be one physical conversation with the person. The person should be called to the OPD or admitted in the hospital. Again, it depends number of other resources, but as far as possible, because telephonically, if you want to assess the effectiveness of certain interventions, that may not be possible and may not be much authenticated information we may get from the participants. So as far as possible, if the resources permit, we should have physical interactions with the patients or the participants.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, again, she is having like one Manjot, like briefly tell difference between descriptive and exploratory design, because it is always confusing.
It is always confusing. That is why I told in my first slide, it is always confusing. But exploratory, I told you that once something is less available with us, we want to explore certain new things, we can always go for the exploratory. So again, it will be depending upon the research question you have. Yes. So if you just want to describe the phenomena, you will be going further descriptive. But exploratory again is coming under the umbrella term of the descriptive one.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, another attendee, anonymous, he is or she is asking, is pre-experimental is separate? I think yes.
Pre-experimental will be discussed tomorrow. It is a separate design. It is a separate, but it will be discussed under the quantitative one.
Another, I think, out of the today's topic, another question is like how to calculate sample size for the study.
Sample size again will be taken by someone else, but sample size, broadly speaking, for qualitative, we are not calculating the sample size. It is the principle of redundancy which is being applied. For the prevalence studies, we have a separate formula to calculate the sample size. If you want to have RCT, there is a separate formula to calculate the sample size. But discussing about the formulas may not be possible in this session because of the constraint of time.
Yes. Another attendee is asking why non-experimental studies are always considered less than experimental studies. And also even in paper presentation and proposal for PhD, non-experimental studies are not preferred, even if it is large population.
That is why I told you that definitely if we compare, non-experimental are little lesser than the experimental one, because of randomization control and manipulation of the independent variables. But that is why I discussed throughout my presentation that our methodology should be so strong. We should have a larger sample size. Designed methodology, larger sample size should be calculated. There should be no flaws in our methodology. Definitely, we always go for the non-experimental research designs, and they are being published in very good journals. Case control studies are of very high levels. Research studies, we should always go for that.
Yes, another R. Sangeeta is asking, ma'am, mixed research design means. So
mixed studies, I'm not very sure organizers might be aware of mixed study. I told you that this is another approach in which there is the integration of the quantitative and the qualitative research approaches. So basically the difference will be at the time of data collection, at the time of data analysis. Again, we need to have a separate session for that. But this is just a gist I'm telling you that the mixed has, I mean, something new which has come up, not very new. We should always go for the mixed type of research studies, and we have started conducting many mixed method research studies. I mean, nursing studies.
Yes. Ma'am, Smita Jha is asking how we'll collect data in cross-sectional study.
Cross-sectional study, I gave you one example that one day we went to the hospital. This was one of my project only. I had 2-3 people and we planned, of course, we planned the things. This nothing like can be just, I just took the questionnaire, went to the participants. No, it is to be planned properly. And cross-sectional, we went to the hospital and on one day only, we studied the whole of the population. And it doesn't mean that एक ही दिन में करना है. It can be over the period of time also. It doesn't mean कि एक ही दिन में करना है. Cross-sectional can be more than one. I mean, it could be over the period of time.
Yes, ma'am. I think we have finished. Okay. Is it necessary to give operational definition in cross-sectional study?
Always. Operational definitions are extremely important. You need to operationally define your variables. Always.
And can we speak mixed method? I'm not ma'am. In qualitative study design, ma'am, you had mentioned action could be. Could you please explain it? In qualitative study design, I think, ma'am, she's asking like you have mentioned about the action. So could you please explain it?
Action in qualitative.
Yes.
What action? I don't remember what action was there.
Okay, ma'am. Another question is like, do we need post hoc power analysis for retrospective study?
Post hoc? Retrospective studies basically will be calculating the odds ratio.
Yes, ma'am.
Odds ratio.
Cluster randomized control trial one.
This will be done under the experimental designs only.
How long should we observe the case in prospective studies?
Again, it depends upon your objective. What is your objective? And the phenomena under study.
Okay.
The phenomena under study.
Ma'am, Simran is asking, how can we apply mixed method research approach?
That is what I'm saying. The mixed method research approach. We have 6 designs under the mixed method research approach. And again, it's a separate session we need to have. I think separately we can discuss, but mixed method, it depends upon your objective. In mixed method, the basic difference is at the time of data collection and at the time of data analysis only.
Yes.
In certain types, we are collecting the quantitative data first, qualitative later, and then we are analyzing. In certain, we are simultaneously collecting both the data and then we are analyzing. It's very well written in the books.
Ma'am, another attendee is asking, can you give us example of formative research design?
Formative, the other type of research designs are there. Again, we need to have a separate section for that. So these are coming under other types of research designs.
Ma'am, another question, can we call the one group pre-post design as a quasi-experimental design?
One group pre-post as a quasi. See, it depends. We have 3 characteristics of experimental research designs. If anyone is missing, that will be considered under the quasi-experimental research design.
And the attendee is asking, please explain types of correlation. I think, ma'am, you have mentioned correlation.
3 types of correlation.
Can we speak mixed method design as collection of qualitative and quantitative design?
Yes, we have already discussed that.
A survey design or any descriptive design with another RCT? Like this, the question.
Yes, of course. That I told you that you will be having different objectives in your. See, if it is your PhD proposal, you will be having lot many objectives. And for each objective, you can plan a different type of research design. It doesn't mean कि मैंने experimental design ऊपर लिख दिया है, तो मेरे objectives भी accordingly होंगे. First objective can be your cross-sectional design, can be your descriptive design, in which we are studying basically the existing situation. Then you are developing your protocol or intervention. Then you are seeing the effectiveness of your intervention. That could be the RCT.
Yes.
So more than one type of research designs can be there in your study.
Yes. I think we have taken up almost, I think, all the questions. Now, can we choose STP studies in PhD program?
No, big no, big no.
Another attendee is asking, ma'am, can you explain odd ratio calculation?
Odds ratio we have already discussed, in which we want to see the ratio of the exposed who have developed the disease and the non-exposed who developed the disease. It's a formula only. We have already discussed that.
Another attendee is asking, please, ma'am, tell me pre-experimental design is a weak design. Why?
Yes, it is a comparatively weak design because as such, there is no randomization. We are not having the baseline data. Pre-experimental designs are to be conducted in which we have just one group and we have just, giving the intervention and seeing the effectiveness. It is a weak design. And it is my personal experience. We conducted, and sometimes it's not possible, depending upon your objective, it is not possible to have their baseline knowledge. Baseline assessment of certain parameters. Yes, we gave intervention and saw the effectiveness of the effectiveness after the intervention. Neurosurgery patients we studied, we gave certain stimuli to see the effectiveness on their sensation, consciousness, EAO, 4-5 parameters. So it was very, very difficult for me to publish that paper. Yes. Somehow it got published. It is a weak design.
Yes. Another attendee is asking, could you please highlight the data collection methods for exploratory research study?
Data collection method will be your observation. It can be your interview. It can be your questioning.
Ma'am, again, that in continuation with that, you have said no for STP studies. So they are asking, like, what is the reason? Any specific reason?
Because the reason is that it is understood whenever we want to teach anything. For example, currently what we have discussed, whatever knowledge we had previously, I expect that some knowledge might be increased among the participants. That is understood कि intervention दिया है, मैंने पढ़ाया है कुछ ना कुछ तो समझ में आएगा. What is the research in that? There is no research.
Ma'am, just I would like to add one thing onto that, Dr. Muthu here.
Yes.
Yeah, this is often a very common question that people, okay, someone have done in the knowledge regarding diabetes, I'm doing it in hypertension, so it is a different study. That's what their justification. But finally, the question is that anything if you teach, the knowledge is likely to increase. It's a century-old query which has been answered many times. If we continue to do that, there is no harm, but we are reinventing wheels. We are going to again reinvent the wheel. And anything, if you teach even rocket science, the knowledge going to increase, maybe 2.2 to 3 point or 3.2 to 4 point, the knowledge will increase. So the important thing is that how it reflects on outcome, patient outcome. You can still do STP, but if the outcome variable is a patient outcome, like if you are teaching something to a nurse that results in less number of hospital stay for patient, that is fine. But just assessing whether knowledge is increased from pre to post test, it's a waste of time, considering the time and money invested in the research. That's what my opinion.
Moreover, we can have more than one variable. It is not only giving STP and seeing its effectiveness. We can have number of other variables to make it more comprehensive. That could be one aspect of a study. But we need to have more in that so that we have more outcome variables. And specifically, we need to focus on the patients. Dr. Muthu has rightly said. We want, ultimate aim is to give quality care, to have more and more evidences in order to have more quality care, good outcome from patient's point of view. But many a times we see एक STP बनाया, उसका effectiveness देखा, knowledge, practices, बस. And practices to theoretical practices, not the practical practices later on, how the person is practicing. It is only giving questionnaire, practices में tick, tick, tick. That's all. No, that should not be done. We have to improve our status at any cost.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. One another point I would like to again discuss and need your opinion. Also, someone else just before asked a question: why non-experimental studies are, weighed less than compared to experimental studies? All those things. Just to clarify one thing, it is all about what is the purpose of your research.
Yes.
What they meant in their question is that in many of their it's a practical experience of them. In many of the presentation or topic proposals, often the non-experimental studies are rejected and the experimental studies are taken up. That's what they have asked. In my, my response to that is that it is not that experimental study is better than non-experimental study. For example, if the objective is to find out the prevalence of tuberculosis in a district, then you have to go for a non-experimental study. You cannot do any experiment. But if the objective is to find out effectiveness to some newly developed treatment, then only choice is not experimental study. But one thing is that when you are doing your post-graduation, the research is mainly conducted for the learning purpose. So often your teachers will be interested interested in giving you some experimental research. So you learn all the steps of experimental research. They may allow you to do some mini project on non-experimental study. Often for the purpose of MSc as a partial fulfillment, they may ask you to do an experimental study for the purpose of learning. Otherwise, there is no research is better than the other research. It's all about objective. That's what.
Definitely. Objective, your methodology, your
what is the purpose?
research question.
It
is not non-experimental or not good. They are equally good. But thing is, it depends upon the topic. Your research question. Make your methodology so strong that no one can question you. Okay? There should be no flaws in the methodology.
Exactly.
Ma'am, another question, like one attendee is asking, ma'am, meta-analysis can be used for non-experimental design? Meta-analysis is altogether different. And in meta-analysis, once we want to go for systematic review and meta-analysis, you have again to define which type of studies you will be including in your meta-analysis. We have a pyramid of the various types of research studies. Again, at the top, the type your RCT, and the lowermost will be your observations and opinion and all. So you have to define which type of studies you will be including in your meta-analysis. It again depends upon your research question in the meta-analysis or meta-synthesis at the systematic reviews. Ma'am, another attendee is asking, can we formulate hypothesis in non-experimental study?
Hypothesis, like in descriptive, it may not be possible because here we are generating the hypothesis. But in correlation studies, we can always, formulate the hypothesis and can test the hypothesis.
Yes, ma'am. Thomas Kuti is asking, in qualitative study, can I conduct a panel discussion with experts to get opinion from samples in PhD studies?
It is basically not the panel discussion. No. It is not the panel discussion. She is getting confused. It is always the focus group discussions we are conducting with the experts, with the participants, different types of participants. Again, depends upon your research questions. It is not the panel discussion. It is the focus group discussions and IDIs we are conducting in qualitative research studies.
Ma'am, another question is pilot study required for qualitative design?
Yes, of course. Though we are not calculating the sample size, but whatever the questionnaire guide you have prepared, definitely you want to have the validity of that particular questionnaire. So we can always go for that.
Yes, ma'am. And I think this is the repeat question only. Can we call the one group pretest post-test design as a quasi-experimental? This is repeat one only. Another Ashia is asking, what is grounded theory?
Again, one of the qualitative research designs.
Another, ma'am, how can a non-experimental studies be made more interesting in PG level? Will it depend on statistical analysis and the sample size?
It depends upon your methodology. We have already discussed your research question. Make it more strong, have good sample size, large sample size. Okay? Have good methodology. You can make it more strong.
Yes. Niharika Jana is asking, kindly explain risk ratio.
Risk ratio, the risk ratio is again, the formula is there in which we want to see the persons, how many exposed develop the disease and how many non-exposed develop the disease. We are calculating the ratio.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another candidate, like, ma'am, which is better choice for PhD, whether qualitative, quantitative?
All are good. All are good.
And another, Mr. Devnarayan is asking, like, STP, what about knowledge attitude and
No,
perception?
cap study. See, cap study, again, if it is altogether something new, nothing is available, then cap
Yes.
studies can be carried out. Otherwise, again, these type of studies, again, if they want to send to some good journals, they will say, we don't accept cap studies. Outrightly rejected.
And the Bubbly Sharma is asking, if I am doing any comparative study with 2 interventions and adding a control group, how much sample size should be there?
See, you have to calculate. It depends upon your research question, how much effect size you want to have. This will be discussed in your sample size calculation.
And there is no ready-made formula for
Yes.
for all the studies. It
Yes.
depends on study to study and variable to variable.
Yes.
And yeah.
Ma'am, and another attendee is asking, conceptual framework is required for descriptive design?
Yes. It is required.
I think ma'am have
think-
answered quite extensively.
Ah.
And also it made more interesting that the question and answer session
Yes,
because yeah, please go ahead if there is more questions, please.
I think one more, ma'am, it is my opinion to share that it is my opinion to share that there is nothing so called as good research and bad research. Every researcher.
Every research is good. Every research is good.
Or another attendee is asking, evaluation research means?
Again, this is one of the research design which is considered under other type of research design. So if the time permits, or if I'm not very sure, I don't know about the rest of the topics, if they are discussed under, I mean, separate session is there or not, I'm not very sure, but it is under other type of research designs.
And another attendee is asking how to do focus group discussion in RCT.
RCT, there is no focus group discussion as such. Focus group discussions we are carrying out in the qualitative research designs. In focus group discussion, again, there is a methodology. How many persons should be there? You need to have a moderator. You need to have the person who is asking the questions. Again, depends upon whether you want to record or you want to just note down the notes. So it's a big subject for collecting the data in qualitative research designs. How to set, we should know.
Another question is, can we say parallel group with multiple arm trial design as randomized controlled trial?
This will be experimental designs will be discussed tomorrow.
Can we
questions related to experimental tomorrow?
Analytical studies are retrospective aspects.
Yes.
And I think 2 more questions, ma'am. I think.
Excuse me, questions related to sample size calculations, experimental studies, and methods of data collections. We have separate sessions on our subsequent days. So all the participants, please join on subsequent days and keep your questions in your pocket and throw on concerned days.
So, sir, another question, like, I think this is again not from today's topic. For developing a new theory in nursing practice, how can I proceed? Steps.
The question is already covered by in our qualitative
previous
research
session.
design.
Yes, sir.
Qualitative research design has been already covered.
Yes.
The participant is requested to see the YouTube video available on our website as well as this CBS publishers to get the answer of this question.
I think we have covered all the questions. Okay, another question, ma'am. If suppose we are conducting some research survey through Google form basis, is it applicable to? Is it applicable to go without ethical clearance?
No, we should not. In fact, if they are asking from a person, the person who is knowledgeable that person will not reply, because every person will ask regarding the ethical concern. So whenever we are preparing any Google form, we need to write prior to beginning with the questionnaire. Prior to that, we need to write that so and so study has been approved by so and so ethics committee, and we need to write the number there. Wrong information should never be given. It is to be through the respective institution ethics committee, whatever research is there.
Yes. I think, ma'am, we have covered almost all the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, again, they are okay. This is separate. Please send the yesterday's YouTube link, they are asking. So no more questions are there, I think, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was very, very interesting session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I log out?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sushil, Dr. Muthu, Dr. Lata.
Please spend few minutes on behalf of Dr. Lata Venkatesan, President, CNRS North Zone, and Dr. Muthu Venkatachalam, and all the EC members, Dr. Kamlesh Madam, Principal AIMS Bhatinda. We would like to thank you for accepting our invitation and taking this session on such a short notice. And really all the participants has learned a lot from these sessions. And we are very thankful to you, madam, for giving your and sharing your wonderful thoughts on the topic. Thank you so much. And definitely we will take your help in the future endeavor also. Thank you so much, ma'am, from CNRS.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be with you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Muthu.
Thank you,
I can
madam.
see Dr. Pragya here.
And an information to all the participants, the session also will be available in the YouTube. So you can anytime watch the session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.